Hey everybody, welcome back. Lieutenant William here. I hope you are doing excellently. So today I want to talk about Captain Kirk and Captain Picard, and how the characters who back them up help them out tremendously, and how it's sort of similar and sort of different in the two shows. Basically, I'm going to be talking about Gene Roddenberry's ideas when he was creating these sets of characters. Yeah, there are a lot of similarities and a lot of differences between these two famous captains, really the first two captains, and I think it's really interesting to look at the characters who surround them and to see how Gene Roddenberry and friends were trying to bring back a lot of the best parts of the original series in the next generation. So of course, Dr. McCoy and Spock sort of back up Kirk by being the angel and the devil on his shoulders. One is very cold and logical and always pointing out what should be done in order to do the best thing for the future, while the other is sort of emotional and irrational and sort of talking about what's going on in the moment and how it's a big deal. So of course, with Captain Picard, things are very different. We have Riker and Data sort of in those roles, but of course, Data isn't anything like Spock. He's really sort of the opposite of Spock. He wants to be human, and he is sort of childlike, whereas Spock was always sort of acting older than his age, and was really sort of trying to forget that he was part human all the time, talking about how it was sort of an insult, basically, to remind him that he was part human. I mean, Data is just sort of everybody's buddy, and then Spock is just sort of continuously putting people down and insulting Dr. McCoy. You know, I mean, there's that episode where McCoy is like, it's sort of curious that that officer hasn't come by to get his physical. You know, he's got to get a medical examination when he comes on the ship here. And Spock is just like, well, maybe he's afraid of your beads and rattles, implying that Dr. McCoy is a witch doctor. So yeah, Captain Picard is basically a little bit more like Spock than Captain Kirk, and this is probably sort of intentional because they realized early on with the original series that Spock was a more popular character than Kirk. It was sort of a problem because Kirk was supposed to be the star of the show. Anyways, it just makes sense to me that Roddenberry probably wanted Picard to be a little bit more Spock-like, and so it sort of fell to Riker to be the guy who had more of those Kirk qualities, basically. And it sort of makes sense because Riker was the guy who got to go on the away missions, by and large, where the new thing was to have the captain stay on the bridge. And of course, people made fun of Picard a lot in the early days because he just sat around all the time. So there were cartoons I remember reading about how boring a Captain Picard action figure would be. And I think there was the caption, "He sits, he talks, he sits, he talks." And, you know, the picture is of an action figure sitting and talking. And it was actually one of the things that Patrick Stewart told his agent to look out for after TNG was done. He said, make sure that the roles I'm going up for from now on do not have me sitting around a lot. And of course, Riker is sort of more the action hero, and you know, it's sort of interesting how they really brought that out and made it something that everybody was aware of with the episode Hyde and Q, where Q says, hey look, you know, maybe I was wrong to think that Picard was such a fascinating guy. Let's deal with Riker here. And of course, Riker did seem like sort of a boring character to me in the beginning, but I came to realize that he really grounds the show and just sort of helps everybody else to fly by being sort of a normal guy who doesn't really have all that much going on. He's not in command. He's not trying to read anybody's mind. He's not the doctor. He doesn't have to figure out a new way to fly the ship like Geordi does or something. You know, so just by being the guy that is sort of in the middle and, you know, everybody else can sort of stem off of in a way, he is actually a pretty interesting and cool character. One of my good buddies actually said to me about a year ago that he was rewatching an episode and he was like, wait a minute, this Riker guy is actually pretty cool. And it's true, he just sort of glossed over the fact that Riker was really cool when you first watched the show because he was just sort of the boring character in a way. He wasn't an android, he didn't have a visor, he couldn't read your mind, and he wasn't a really cool-looking alien. So when they were first developing and casting TNG, Gene Roddenberry ended up saying to Jonathan Frakes, "There's a hint of the Machiavellian in your eye." And so that is one of the reasons that people often think that he looked at Riker as more of the Kirk character than Picard. Yeah, they sort of joke around in interviews about the making of the first TNG movie, Generations, where Data gets the emotion chip. They joke around about how it was really Picard who was getting the emotion chip in that film, because they do this thing, of course, where they have him lose his brother and his brother's son, Rene, in this horrible fire. And it really changed Picard from sort of a cold, logical guy who we see in the earlier episodes of TNG and even throughout the show, and it changed him into somebody who was open to feeling really bad and also really good, and it just gave him a wider range of emotions. But that just goes to show how this character was originally conceived as being somebody a little bit more Vulcan than like Shatner's Kirk. So you could say that Data ends up being the guy who is sort of Picard's cold, logical side, except, as we all know, Data was just a little bit too cute and warm and cuddly compared to Spock. So it didn't really work out the same, of course. So yeah, I used to think Riker was sort of the boring character on the show. He's not an alien, he's not an android, and he really doesn't have any exceptional qualities. He's not particularly strong. I mean, we've got Worf and Data. He can't read your mind like his sort of girlfriend, Deanna Troi. So he seemed like the boring character on the show to me when I first saw it back in the 90s, but he works as a backbone for the show to some degree. Now, it's true that Picard is really the main character on this show, but if you watch the show, it's such an ensemble cast that everybody sort of plays their part. And it's really interesting to see how Picard and Dr. Crusher, they sort of end up being the grandma and grandpa of the show, and then Riker and Deanna end up being sort of like the mom and dad of the show. Now, of course, Worf and Geordi and Data, they all sort of end up feeling like kids on the show, but of course it's really Wesley who is the kid on the show. So it's interesting how they have this multi-generational thing, and it really feels like a family. Obviously, Dr. Crusher is Wesley's mom, but the way that Riker and Deanna end up having these mom and dad qualities, because of course Crusher leaves, Dr. Crusher leaves, and they all sort of step in to help raise Wesley. And of course Picard doesn't really like children at first, but he sort of gets over it. This is sort of another thing that's sort of like Spock, I mean, Spock was not really a kid-friendly character. I mean, you don't see him with kids. You can imagine him basically having a little bit of disdain for children. And it's interesting, Spock was really sort of not a very nice guy on the original show. He means well, and that's what's so interesting about him. He's one of these no-nonsense people who's like, look, we got work to do, people. We can't just be messing around and joking around. And it's really interesting to see how in the movies he becomes even more serious and sort of doubles down. They all sort of get improved, the characters, for the movies. Kirk and McCoy are also sort of more serious, and the whole tone just sort of reinvents them. And it's kind of awesome how it works. And then, of course, for the next generation, they had to find a way to make it sort of kid-friendly again and sort of open to everybody again. Anyways, thanks so much for watching, everybody. We are trying to get enough watch time that we can get this channel remonetized, so it really does mean the world to me to have you guys watching, and I hope that you did like this video and found it interesting and everything. Please leave a comment letting me know what kinds of videos I could do to interest you. Leave a like and a comment and let me know what you think about all of this, and please do subscribe if you haven't already, and, let's see what we can do with this channel. Alright, everybody, live long and prosper, and Kapla!